Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss.
We ain't play my man, I swear to God. I don't know what we're gonna do to him, but we're gonna lynch his ass if he ever come here. When they come play them Wizards up there, we're gonna lynch his ass. If a young buck, I like you. I like you, my man, and everything. And nigga game that keep his mouth shut. Don't you stop that bullshit, man. Leave that man alone, man. That man don't bother you, man. That man got kids, man. He can't afford to go back and forth with you, man. You can stand that shit, man. You don't take care of your kids, man. You feel me? You like your kids, but you don't take care of them. What we gonna do here right now? This is what we gonna do. Sorry, Jay. We gonna try to make it either we gonna get the fuck out the ghetto or we gonna make it in the ghetto, man. And the only way we gonna do it is to stick together, you feel me? Yeah. But you ain't gonna stop, so I'm gonna stop like that. You ain't gonna stop. You ain't gonna stop. You ain't gonna stop. Ask him what he did with his penny. Who? What he did with his bronze medal they gave him.
Why you ain't wear it, yo?
You just told me you threw that motherfucker overseas.
Huh?
Late somewhere. So I said, he said, I would all your to my whole summer chasing a big penny. How is he gonna tell a bitch he worth $100 million and he chased a big penny for 2 months straight?
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Standing on Business with Eric Foss. I'm your host, Eric Foss. All right, guys, today we're going to get into something that's from my area, but a lot of you guys may have heard of this because it all comes from the Stop Snitching movement. That movement started in Baltimore. If you guys remember, back in, I believe it was like 2004, sometime around there, yeah, about 04, they did a Stop Snitching video. The guy's name was Skinny Suge that actually came out with it. And it got very popular all over the country. And one of the reasons why is because Carmelo Anthony was in the video. The NBA player, 3-time Olympic medalist, you know, Carmelo Anthony, he's that dude. Well, he's from Murphy Homes Projects in Baltimore. Now, he grew up in these projects, and when people grow up in projects, people get very close. Well, the guy that they're talking about putting the money on his head is a guy named Tyree Stewart, Little Black. He was a drug dealer. We're going to get into him because this all ties into the story. But the guy that they were actually so pissed about was one of their homies from Murphy Homes, one of the most notorious Baltimore crime figures, hitman slash type of guy from my era. He's 48 years old. He's my age. He wound up getting a life sentence, or maybe 2 life sentences. We'll get into that. But anyway, he was just granted compassionate release, and they changed his sentence to 35 years. He now has a release date of 2034. With the First Step Act and all kicking in with all the way they calculate stuff and all that, he should be in a halfway house in about 5 years. So he'll be on the streets in about 5 years. So let's get into him and let's get into the story. Okay, well, the story, I'm going to go into the personal stuff that I know personally. August of 2003, that's when I got indicted by the feds. Now, the same week that I got indicted, Tyree Stewart, his drug ring got indicted. They were big marijuana dealers, and they were selling what was called Arizona at that time. Now, Tyree had a history. Back in the day, there was whispers that he was a rat, but he was always getting money. He always had a lot of money. He was always a hustler. His cousin is the one that wound up in a wheelchair because DMX actually shot him. Okay? So his cousin's name was Dick. He's done passed away now, and he's actually part of this case. So anyway, Tyree was always known, the whispers in the street, as a rat. But he always was getting money. He's got that bag. And you know how it is. And he was also very vicious. He'd put that money on your head. So what he did was he would use Itchy Man. And he would use Itchy Man to do these hits or whatever, or basically intimidate other people. Because when you're in the trenches and you're in a place like Baltimore City, you need hitters. You're not just going to do whatever you want. So anyway, in August of 03, all of us get indicted. Not Itchy Man yet. Okay, so I see Tyree, whole case coming through. Now, at that time, there was about 32 of them. My guys from Baltimore are familiar with this. know I know what I'm talking about. About 32 of them at that time get indicted. So now, let me get this out of the way. There's word that most of them did cooperate, of the original 32. So I won't go into who. Tyree definitely did, and his friend Corey, his right-hand man, his lieutenant, definitely did. Corey Smith and Tyree Stewart. But, you know, all the other ones, I'm not sure of. But I'm sure of someone who didn't on the case. There was an old head named Johnny Cool. Shout out to Johnny Cool. He didn't tell. That's a fact. So everybody didn't tell. So I don't know how many, but a lot of people did, just like any other case. But anyway, get into it. So they get the indictment. So now there's some bodies on the indictment because they were running a big marijuana conspiracy. That doesn't bring too much heat, especially in a place like Baltimore City. But when you factor in murders, that's when you get the heat. So that's where Itchy Man comes in. Itchy Man was always in the newspaper, always in, just, the folklore, beating murders, beating attempted murders, stuff like that. He used Margaret Mead as a lawyer. So he was very popular and he was very feared. I mean, the guy was like legendary in his projects. Like, I remember he ran for the police, climbed up these things, stuff like that. Now, let's read a little article from ESPN. And this is an article. It says, police DVD aimed at jailed drug kingpin. And now they're talking about Tyree here. Okay. Denver Nuggets star Carmelo Anthony might have provided celebrity appeal in Stop Snitching, a witness intimidation DVD for sale on the streets of Baltimore. But law enforcement officials told the Baltimore Sun the profanity-laced production was aimed at Tyree Stewart. That's black. That's who I was just talking about. A man who once ran a $50 million drug ring in West Baltimore, now in prison and cooperating with investigators. Tyree wound up getting 6 years. That's part of the reason why Itchy Man got out, or got, a 35-year sentence. Stewart is the target of many of the anti-witness rants on the recently released DVD, the seventh Skinny Shug production to hit the market, according to lawyers and law enforcement officials. Now, the guy Skinny Shug, Stone Sailor, who co-hosts with me sometimes on my lives, he was actually in Coleman, and Stone Sailor knows Skinny Shug, and actually they're pretty cool with each other. And Stone Sailor was a correctional officer. They say Stewart is believed to have helped federal authorities indict Salanthio Thomas, or Itchy Man, alleged by police to have been one of the most violent enforcers in the city. Thomas has been acquitted of 2 murders and 12 attempted murder charges in state court. But several months ago, he was indicted on federal conspiracy charges that could carry the death penalty. This is Tyree and Corey wound up telling on Itchy Man, and then they dropped this indictment where they were facing death penalty. They're saying that Itchy Man and his brother did a murder for hire for Tyree Stewart's drug organization. Thomas's defense attorney, Arcangelo M. Tumminelli, told the Sun. I should know his name. That's my old attorney. He's passed away now. But anyway, now with Itchy Man's brother was a rat and testified against Itchy Man. We'll get into that. And he was a rat for a while, they say. He wore a wire on this guy, that used to box, that was from Murphy Homes. This is the treachery in the streets, guys. And this is what? This stop snitching and stuff like that. This was serious down here. People get their heads busted. To understand the intrigue, one has to go back to the late 1990s when Tyree Stewart, also known as Black and Blicky, ran one of the city's largest and most profitable marijuana rings. He sold Arizona marijuana that he obtained from suppliers in New York, prosecutors said. A high-quality form of the drug that's sold in Baltimore for about $2,000 a pound. Nowadays, that's just Reggie. At shops throughout the West Side, workers packaged the drugs for retail sale managed by Stewart's lieutenants. Stewart also sold wholesale, prosecutors said. Oh, and before I go any further, I shouted out Johnny Cool, but there's one other dude that I know didn't tell, and it's that fat motherfucker Melvin. He didn't tell. The guy named Melvin, he didn't tell either. He was just a fat, he would get on your nerves and shit, but he didn't tell. I know that. So if anybody's listening. According to authorities, Stewart protected his territory. His enforcers intimidated potential rivals and protected his turf with violence, including murder, prosecutors said. In court papers, prosecutors say Stewart paid $10,000 for the 2002 killing of 21-year-old Terry Cheeks, retaliation for killing one of Stewart's associates. Stewart also used Thomas as an enforcer, they said. Now, you got to remember at this time, you had the Lexington terrorist boys out there, Keon, Mumbles, and Turk. We're going to do some content on them because they just gave their life sentence back. But you had them out there. You had a lot of dangerous people out there. So Tyree had to get someone like an itchy man on his side. He had to. And that money speaks volumes. Okay. But by the early part of this decade, authorities were onto Stewart and his operation. Confidential informants had tipped off. Give me 1 second, guys. Confidential informants had tipped off. Hey, guys. Confidential informants. By the early part of the decade, authorities were on to Stewart and his operation. Confidential informants had tipped off detectives. They watched drugs transactions during surveillance operations at some of Stewart's shops, according to court papers. In March of 2003, investigators installed a closed-circuit television camera and an in-audio interception device in the kitchen and living room of the shop at 1809 West Lanville Street. They also started monitoring Stewart's cell phones. So they had their phones tapped and they also bugged different houses that people would hang in. The mob calls them social clubs down in the hood. We'll have houses that we running shit out of. And like, I remember like back in the day, we might have a house in the hood and right in the beginning, you might tear the floor out and just put a rug over it. But we know that that's like that. But the police don't know. So if they come in after us, whoa, they'll fall through. There's all kind of tricks to this. Okay. Over the ensuing months, investigators gathered evidence against the organization, including Stewart's conversations about counter-surveillance techniques. Authorities called it Operation Arizona. In August of 2003, that's when we all got locked up, same week, a federal grand jury indicted Stewart and 31 co-defendants for their alleged involvement in the drug trafficking enterprise. Agents also seized more than $90,000, handguns, and 4 luxury vehicles, including Stewart's $100,000 Mercedes-Benz CL. It was a huge case, said Anthony Barksdale, acting chief of the city's organized crime division, who spearheaded Operation Arizona. Almost right away, according to court papers, Stewart began cooperating. This is true, and here's how I know this. When we first got indicted, they take us to DOC back then, because Supermax wasn't Chesapeake Detention Facility yet. So we had no real federal hold'em. We used to be held in the counties on the Eastern Shore. We'd go to Supermax. It was just all fucked up. So now, we all were in DOC together. Like I said, we all caught our case at the same time. And I watched Tyree say, oh, and grab a bunch of them. And they huddled around. And he was having a meeting with his guys. He was telling them, look, I'm going to tell, you might as well tell this, you might as well tell that. He was already formulating a plot. So yes, the prosecutor's right about that. He started cooperating off the bat. I've seen that. In one court motion, a federal agent details how the day he was arrested, Stewart made a call to an associate trying to get him to drop off money and a gun to an undercover officer. Court documents suggest this wasn't a new gig for Stewart. Uh-oh. For instance, one defense lawyer noted in a motion that the police department had previously handled Tyree Stewart as a confidential informant, the type of snitching the men on the DVD call unacceptable. That's just not acceptable down here, guys. You really get your head busted. Law enforcement officials say they are frustrated by the pervasive street attitude that witnessing is poor behavior, a sentiment clearly demonstrated in Stop Snitching. In one scene, men sitting on the steps of a row house expressed dismay after being asked about Tyree by someone off camera. Word is, they rats, one man exclaimed. They got our hood so messed up, effed up, where people think ratting is cool. Black changed the norm. Black is Tyree. The first man said, referring to Stewart by his street name. Black made the people think it was cool to rat and get some money. That's why we got federal penitentiaries all across the country where people say, then Baltimore, whatever, rat. And actually, that's not true. Baltimore isn't known for that in the feds. They actually got one of the cleanest cars. There's no such thing as a totally clean car, but Baltimore runs a tight ship. In the scene involving Carmelo Anthony, the basketball player refers to Black and laughingly says he might put some money on his effing brains. Now, why would Carmelo Anthony get involved in that? That's because Itchy Man was from his hood. He's a hood legend. Okay? Melo grew up there in Murphy Homes. It's unclear whether Anthony is talking about Tyree, he was, or a freestyle rapper in the DVD, who in the preceding scene seems to make fun of the professional ball player. But many others in the DVD are clearly talking about Stewart. We see this group still concerned about a case that we took down a year and a half ago, Barksdale said. They still feel the case, it has a huge impact. Okay, so that's from an ESPN article, guys. Now, let's get down to Itchy Man. Sentenced to life term. Let me see if this is his compassionate release here. He's got a lot of stuff on here, guys, so just bear with me. There's YouTube videos about him. There's Baltimore Sun articles about this guy. Okay. Let me see, where's the date? Let me see. Go back here. Let's go to this page here. That's 2008. We got to get something now. Here we go. Now, this is the press release when the case was over. Baltimore, Maryland. Salathiel Thomas, a.k.a. Itchy Man, age 30, and Edward Countess, age 30, both of Baltimore, were sentenced today to life plus 10 years in federal prison after being convicted on July 6, 2006 on 5 counts relating to their participation in a 2001 murder for hire in Baltimore County, announced United States Attorney for District of Maryland, Rod Rodenstein. U.S. District Judge Catherine C. Blake, that's the one who signed my wiretap, said that the sentence was what the statute required and the advisory guidelines required and what justice required. She referred to the crime as a cold-blooded murder for hire, and this can important, efficient, and effective prosecution. Now, Blake is the same one who just granted them a sentence reduction. So I guess she changed her mind. Salathiel Thomas and Edward Countess joined a growing list of armed criminals who have been exiled to federal prison for the rest of their lives. In the federal system, a life sentence means life in federal prison far from home, with no probation and no parole. These vicious contract killers are now off the streets forever. Nope. Under Baltimore exile, we are targeting our city's most violent repeat offenders and holding them accountable for their crimes in federal court. What the Exile Project is, guys, that went all over the United States of America back in the early 2000s when they started taking, the feds started taking all them gun cases. If you're a convicted felon with a gun, they would just take your case, boom, boom, boom. That started in the early 2000s. And that's Operation Exile. Special agent in charge of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Gregory Gant, said the successful investigation and prosecution of these armed violent criminals demonstrates how the ATF and its law enforcement partners will not tire until we put the worst of the worst violent offenders in jail for the rest of their lives. Baltimore Police Commissioner Leonard Ham said, "We're proud to have partnered with prosecutors from the United States Attorney's Office to ensure that Itchy Man will spend the rest of his natural life in prison. This is a great day for law-abiding citizens of Baltimore." Okay. Evidence at trial, which began on June 12, 2006, established that on October 2nd, 2001, Itchy Man and Edward Countess shot and killed Jesse Williams, then age 33, in the 8200 block of Cortland Manor Road in Baltimore County. Testimony at trial proved that Thomas and Countess ambushed Williams as he got into his car to go to work and shot him 15 times, pursuant to a contract murder ordered by Baltimore City drug dealer Tyree Stewart. In retaliation for a 1999 robbery, Thomas and Countess and 3 other men were paid a total of $10,000 for their roles in planning and carrying out the murder. That's only $2,000 a piece, guys. I would assume Itchy Man probably took the bulk. I don't know. Thomas and Countess were sentenced to 3 concurrent terms of life in prison for murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and for possession of a firearm in furtherance of drug crime or violent crime resulting in death. 20 years concurrent for conspiracy to possess a firearm in furtherance of a drug crime or crime of violence, and mandatory consecutive 10 years for possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug crime or violent offense. Now, that mandatory 10 years is because they discharged the firearm, because usually it would be a mandatory 5 years for having it, 7 years mandatory for just brandishing it, and 10 years mandatory minimum for firing it. Obviously, they fired it because the guy got killed. Dante Thomas, age 34, and Linwood Smith, age 42, both of Baltimore, were also charged in this case and previously pleaded guilty to charges relating to their participation in the murder. Who's Dante Thomas? That's Itchy Man's brother. And he's the one who ratted. He took the stand. It was wild in court. Listen, they had to pull Itchy Man out of court and everything. I think they had to put the shock belt on him. And his family was going on there when his brother got up there to testify. They're like, why are you letting these, they were saying these crackers do this to you and stuff like that. Now, we'll take the cracker part out of it, and I will put this in it. Once again, you see how the government is turning family members on each other. Okay, so we already got into them. Okay, Tyree Stewart, once again, the head of the organization, age 32 of Joppa, Maryland, and Corey Smith, age 30, that was his lieutenant, of Baltimore, both pleaded guilty in a separate case to engaging in a continual criminal enterprise, and as part of their pleas, they actually admitted to ordering the contract killing on behalf of the drug organization. Their sentences have not been scheduled. The reason for that, like I told guys, if you want to see who's cooperating, what you got to do is you got to look at the time that they pled guilty until the time they got sentenced. When you have guys hanging around for years that pleaded guilty and ain't been sentenced yet, there's a reason. The reason why is because other people are still fighting cases and stuff like that, and they might need them. So in other words, it usually takes about 4 to 6 months to get sentenced after you plead guilty, because sometimes there's evidentiary here and sometimes there's other things. Actually, in my last case, I got sentenced on the same day because I requested it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's just like, what the fuck? You don't need me sitting around, or there's no evidentiary hearings or nothing. It is what it is. These are my guidelines. Let's go. So anyway, Corey and them wound up getting sentenced to like 7 years each. So Tyree got like 7 years, Corey got like 7 years, something like that. And they were the heads of the organization, and they admitted to ordering the murders. United States Attorney Rod Ronstein praised the investigative work performed by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Baltimore City Police, Baltimore County Police, United States Attorney's Office, the U.S. Marshal's Office. Also assisted in the apprehension of Itchy Man. And he also thanked Jason M. Weinstein and Andrea Smith, who were prosecuting the case. Now, I just want to get down to how he's being released and why. We'll get into them details. Because you see, this guy's this isn't no little thing. This is what sparked the Stop Snitching video. Now, let me go find this. That's 2008. I've seen it. Let me think. Now, here's one of the reasons Itchy Man got compassionate release. While he was in prison, he started a program, a violence intervention program that worked in Baltimore. Okay, now they have articles about this, and Itchy Man is the one who created this. And here's the guy speaking of it. I don't want to read the whole thing. Weinstein spoke of some lengthy Itchy Man Thomas, who at age 30 received a life sentence plus 10 years for carrying out the murder for hire in 2001. Itchy Man is at a penitentiary in Colorado. He'll probably die there. Police Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hyde told a young man named Bailey from East Baltimore he knew him from back in the day when Bailey was a 9-year-old making tips carrying grocery bags for elderly people. He was like a little brother to me, Hyde said. I tried to mentor him, but drug dealers sucked Bailey into the life. And the last Hyde heard, he was serving 17 federal as a 3-time loser involved in a gun crime. So these are all the people who were speaking out in his intervention program that he created from behind bars. Okay. Now, life term. I'll find it, guys. I'll find this one. There, what dealer pleads guilty. Give me 1 second, guys. 1 second. Okay, we put compassionate release in there. That's where it was upheld. Let me get down here. Let me type something else in, guys. Let me just do his name. Thomas. Let's see how that works. Not many great matches. Hang on. Here we go. United States versus Thomas. Now, this is United States of America versus Salanthio Thomas. Catherine Blake, the judge who said that they deserved the life sentence and all that stuff. Salanthio Thomas is currently serving 2 concurrent life sentences for involvement in a murder-for-hire conspiracy which resulted in the death of Jesse Williams. Represented by appointed counsel in 2023, Mr. Thomas filed a motion for compassionate release. He seeks a sentence reduction based on a combination of factors, including the disparity of length of his sentence with the average sentence for murder. Okay. Now in Baltimore, the average sentence for murder, like in the state courts and stuff, I mean, you can cop out real quick to 15 or 20 years. You know what I'm saying? And be home in half the time. You know. The disparity of his sentence with his co-defendant's sentence. Now, this is what helped him. We'll get into that. His age, his mental health and repeated suicide attempts, his rehabilitation is also the 5th factor. Now, the government opposed the motion and Mr. Thomas replied, no oral argument is necessary. For the reasons that follow, Mr. Thomas' motion will be granted in part and denied in part. His sentence will be reduced to 35 years. Okay, now it goes into the steps of evaluating compassionate release. Extraordinary and compelling reasons is one of the things for compassionate release. Now, a lot of times with the older mob guys, it'll be age and stuff like that. Well, with him, he's my age. Let's see his. He raises several factors to show that extraordinary and compelling reasons warrant his release. While none of the factors standing alone would justify release, the court finds that in the aggregate, Mr. Thomas has met the burden to show extraordinary and compelling reasons. First, The disparity between Mr. Thomas's sentence and the average sentence for murder in this district weighs in Mr. Thomas's favor. A sentencing disparity may, in some circumstances, constitute an extraordinary and compelling reason to grant compassionate release. See United States v. Payton. Okay. Mr. Thomas was convicted of 2 counts of murder for hire, which mandates life sentence, all that stuff, statute. Now, the statute imposed a mandatory life sentence when he was sentenced in 2004, and it continues to impose a mandatory life sentence today. But nothing in 3582 prevents its application to mandatory life sentences. Okay, blah, blah, blah. As Mr. Thomas explains, that's Itchy Man, the average sentence for murder is significantly shorter than Mr. Thomas's sentence, both nationwide and within this district. That's true. According to the United States Sentencing Commission, the nationwide mean sentence for murder for fiscal year 2023 was 285 months, and the median sentence was 276 months. So that's less than 360 is 30 years. So that's less than 30 years. And that's in the feds. Within this district, which is Baltimore, it was 310 months or 300 months. Okay, it's 300 months, 25 years. Considering that Mr. Thomas was sentenced when he was 30 years old, Mr. Thomas is likely to serve far longer than either mean sentence. This exceptionally long sentence counsels towards relief. Now they just got a bunch of examples. Now here's the one that really helped him, and this should be able to help Thomas Carbonano or whatever, Huck, because of the co-defendant's sentence. Now look at this. The disparity between Mr. Thomas's sentence and those of his co-defendants is compelling. While Mr. Thomas and his co-defendant, Edward Countess, were both sentenced to mandatory life sentences, the sentences of the other co-conspirators were dramatically shorter. Mr. Thomas points to the sentences of his brother, Dante Thomas, and their acquaintance, Linwood Smith. Dante drove Mr. Thomas, so Dante drove his brother Itchy Man and Itchy Man's boy to Williams' home, where they shot him. Dante was sentenced to 77 months of imprisonment, which would be 6 years, 5 months, something like that. I don't know. 62, 72. 60 months is 5 years. 72, 6 years. Yeah, 6 years, 5 months. Mr. Thomas and Countess, that's his buddy, they went to Williams' home that morning, but he overslept. Smith's sentence was 64 months of imprisonment, so 5 years, 4 months. Unlike Mr. Thomas, they did not pull the trigger and kill Williams directly. They also pleaded guilty. Dante, which is his brother, testified for the prosecution and trial. Dante and the guy Smith, Linwood, minor roles in the conspiracy, and their acceptance of responsibility justifies some sentencing disparity. Okay. Now here's what the court finds, because now as you see in there, he's arguing about the low sentences for his brother and the other guy, which they cooperated, but they're not even talking about the disparity because of cooperation. They're talking about it because of their role. They had a minor role. Now, here's where it gets into, this goes in Itchy Man's favor here. The court finds that the more apt comparison is to the sentences of Tyree Stewart, who was the big man, he's the boss, who issued the contract for the murder, and Corey Smith, who brokered the contract, the lieutenant, and hired Mr. Thomas and Mr. Countess for $10,000. Stewart was sentenced to 83 months of imprisonment, and Smith was sentenced to 97 months. So neither one of them got even 10 years. Like Dante and Smith, Stewart and Corey also pleaded guilty. Okay? They were also cooperating witnesses. Still, Itchy Man has already served over 20 years of his sentence, more than 3 times that of Stewart's sentence. Though some disparity in the sentence is no doubt justified, the disparity between Stewart's 83-month sentence and the life sentence that Mr. Thomas is now serving is disproportionate. How about that, guys? So Stewart cooperated. He's the head guy, and he winds up getting 83 months, which would be 72 and 12. So if he got 7 years, and the guy he testified on got life. And they're saying, whoa, that's not right. Well, what about John Gotti and Sammy the Bull? That was even worse. But anyway, they didn't have this going on back then. Okay. Stewart was the actual mastermind behind the scheme. He planned and directed it. Though Mr. Thomas and Countess executed the scheme, Stewart has similar culpability. He actually has the most. The court finds that the sentence disparity weighs towards extraordinary and compelling reasons for relief. Next, the court considers Mr. Thomas's young age when he committed the offense. Mr. Thomas was 25 years old when he killed Williams. As one Fourth Circuit judge has explained, modern research instructs that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes it possible to exercise good judgment when presented with difficult life situations, does not finish maturing until the age of 25. Think about that, guys. So, I mean, there's probably truth to that, because I think a lot different now at 48 than I did when I was 22, you know. Mr. Thomas was a young adult whose childhood, as explained below, was racked by instability and violence. The court finds his young age is another factor that supports a finding of extraordinary and compelling reasons for release. He also relies on his mental health issues. His very difficult childhood, which is well documented in a social worker's report, and his rehabilitation during the term of his incarceration. While rehabilitation alone cannot constitute an extraordinary and compelling release, it may be considered in combination with other circumstances in determining whether and to what extent a reduction of the defendant's term of sentence is warranted. Okay, now you see that? It's like a prong. No one thing is going to get this done. That's why I tell people when they're doing these appeals, I know about this shit. I know, I'm not a lawyer, but I know how it has to be to get it to even have a chance to work. And as you see here, it works. Now, he's also had a good record in the BOP, taking steps towards rehabilitation. But yeah, I think he got caught a knife, some bullshit. Nothing like that, nothing crazy. He obtained his GED, completed approximately 15 hours of additional programming, and started a stop bullying program in prison, which I read about. It actually came out to the streets. Further, Mr. Thomas earned his GED and completed much of this program before the passage of the First Step Act, when he was serving a mandatory life sentence. So in other words, they were looking at it like, yo, he thought he was in there for life and he still changed, which is the same thing happened with my buddy Dave that comes in the chat, and he was going to chat marks and everything like that. You have to show some type of remorse or some type of change. You can't just file something and say, hey, he's not a rat and his friends are rats. That doesn't work. It just doesn't, guys. His last Thomas was motivated not by the possibility of early release, but because of his genuine desire for rehabilitation and self-improvement. His last disciplinary infraction was in 2020, and none of his infractions involved violence against others. Most of his infractions are for minor violations, including failure to appear for count and making a 3-way phone call. His most severe infraction, possession of a weapon, in 2018. Thomas was immediately admitted culpability at the DHO hearing, basically pled guilty. He's also recognized the evil of his offense and expressed remorse for his commission of Mr. Williams' murder. Mr. Thomas' rehabilitation is especially impressive considering the extreme hardship he has overcome. Now, he's really from the projects, guys. Listen to this. Mr. Thomas's mother gave birth to him when she was only 5.5 months pregnant. His upbringing was plagued by violence, poverty, and instability. And that's true, guys. Mr. Thomas grew up in the Murphy Homes, a public housing project where, as Mr. Thomas recounted, he saw people shot in front of him and dead bodies on the ground as normal. The trauma was further compounded by his parents' drug addictions. Mr. Thomas was subjected to repeated domestic violence incidents that took place between his drug-addicted parents when they would openly fight over illicit substances in front of him. So the father's beating the shit out of the mother for stealing drugs. You know, this is real life shit, guys. This is what really happens. Both of his parents died from AIDS. Mr. Thomas was often neglected, left without food, and subject to physical abuse. See, you could become a victim when you come from these circumstances. These horrific circumstances of Mr. Thomas' upbringing make his subsequent rehabilitation, maturity, and personal growth even more noteworthy. Finally, the court considers Mr. Thomas' mental health challenges. His social work report shares that Mr. Thomas has attempted suicide several times. While the exact nature of his mental health issues is hard to evaluate, given his decision not to seek help from the Bureau of Prison, those issues will not be entirely discounted. Considering all of his circumstances together, the court is satisfied that he has shown an extraordinary and compelling reason for release, and considering Mr. Thomas's rehabilitation, lack of significant disciplinary infractions while incarcerated, and family and community support, the court finds that he is not a danger to the community. They found that I was because I got in trouble in jail. I mean, but hey, good for him. You know what I mean? I'm happy for him. I might get a hold of him and see if he could call in during one of our lives also, because I would like for him to speak, you know, to our audience about, you know, the effects of some of this shit. Okay. These are the 3553A factors. He's now 50 years old. Well, he's 48, you know, but they say 50. Or he might be 50 by now. It's around my age. After consideration of all the relevant factors, Mr. Thomas' sentence will be reduced to 35 years. And that's it. So, as you've seen there, guys, this can work. This guy was notorious. Trust me, you'd rather have Huck and them on your ass than you would have Itchy Man on your ass. I'm just being real, guys. You know what I mean? Now, he's changed. Just like Huck has changed. Just like the maturity. So these things have to count. And these things have to be brought up. And there has to be awareness brought to this, you know? Like I said, I have his information. I have Itchy Man's release date. And what I may do is I may, on one of the lives, I may call him in. I may have him call in and, you know, maybe speak if we got younger people listening and stuff, or some parents, you know, they can replay it for their kids and stuff. You know, maybe have him talk for a few minutes, 15 minutes or something. If you want to look him up, guys, just look up Itchy Man, like Itchy Man, Itchy Trigger. That's why they call him Itchy Man, Trigger Finger. If you want to look him up, because there's so much stuff on him, just go ahead and Google him on YouTube and you'll see the guy that I'm talking about. But he's coming home. It looks like he's changed his life. He's rehabilitated himself. God's given him another chance, just as he's given Tommy Reynolds another chance. So it's about what these people, if they, God or somebody has given them a chance. It's about what they do with the chance. And hopefully they do the right thing. Because it is true about being young and coming up in certain circumstances with younger parents, maybe just a split home, things like that. That does lead to incarceration, does lead to violence. Poverty leads to violence, things like that. Okay, and then by the time you look up, you're 45, 50 years old, like, damn, I'm doing life in prison, and I don't even believe that this is real. So guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed this story today. But this can be done, guys. So until next time, just remember, always stand on business.